Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce on for the little Sunday night solo venture, which I'll be honest with you, I feel like I need a comment section joined Cubs venting, not for any bad reason, just a lot of thoughts to get through, a lot of time to stew over stuff. I spent about 6 hours of my weekend on the road. So as a result of that, a lot of time to think about Cubs baseball, especially when you're listening to it on the radio with Zach Zaidman. And I appreciate that, Scott. I got you guys if you got me, and we're going to have a great show here tonight. Of course, we're going to talk about the White Sox series. Cubs taking 2 out of 3 over the lesser team in Chicago, because as tonight's episode is properly titled, the Cubs own Chicago, because that's just the way it is. Whether you like it or not, that's just the way it is. Don't copyright me, please, I swear. In addition to that, yes, Triple R bail bonds. Go Cubs, go. And it is sad times over at Sox on Tap. I just checked in with my friends Tony, Bez, and Steve over there before jumping on here. And it's a little somber. It's a little somber over there. And so we asked them if they were fun bad or not. And then we really, I think we really pushed the buttons. So we made sure to pop in there and poke around a little bit before heading over here and talking with more enthusiasm and excitement, because our baseball team is the proper team in Chicago right now. And 100% Triple R. Always have, always will. Cubs is Chicago. And yes, tough scene, hat-bodied Montgomery, fitting. It is, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Before we get into everything, of course, a little bit of housekeeping. Be sure to follow along with us here at the On Tap Sports YouTube page if you're not already. Hit subscribe, hit that bell button as well. You know when all of our shows go live. That's how I know Scott knew that Sox on Tap was live, because he's a subscriber. He's got that bell button pushed, and he knows when everybody goes live. He was checking in over with our friends, make sure they're doing okay after the loss. And of course, you then know when we go live, because that's the best. And besides baseball, of course, we got football, hockey, basketball, you name it, golf. We got it all here at On Tap Sportsnet. So be sure to follow along on the YouTube and be like our commenters here tonight. Just a simple yeah from my dad in the comment section. How fun is that? I know it's probably in response to one of the comments, but I don't know the context of it, neither here nor there. Let's get into it, shall we? The Cubs own Chicago. They always have. They always will, and especially in 2025, they have. The Cubs officially went 5-1 against the Chicago White Sox in the year 2025, and in this series, they were able to take 2 out of 3 after Friday's loss. I won't lie, Friday's loss sucked. I felt it coming. There was going to be one of those games in this series. I said it on Thursday's show. I was like, this Sox team, they're young, they're dumb and naive. Like, they're going to get one. And they did. And it was a big one, nonetheless. You know, when John Birdie checks into the game, it's bad. It's either really good or really bad. In this case, it was really bad. And that's just kind of one I've completely wiped from my memory. Bad start for Shota, even though he still only gave up like 3 earned. The rest of the pen gets shelled just because Shota's pitch count gets high. And the rest is history. A couple little things for the Cubs offensively, not really much there, but they came back. They came back on Saturday nicely, and we've talked about it on this show before. Juice brought up the stat just a few shows ago about how good this Cubs team is after a loss. That continues to translate once again after a loss on Friday. The Cubs win on Saturday. That was a 6-1 victory on Saturday, and of course, the beauty, the absolute beauty of that win on Saturday. Ron Luce got a dinger point because Ian Happ went yard, and I desperately needed it. I'm still hanging around. I'm not out of this yet, sons of bitches. I'm not out of this yet. And, of course, Matt Shaw continued his hot pace. Talk a little bit more about him, I think, as this show persists. And the Cubs get away on Saturday with a big win. And then today, it might not have been the prettiest, right? Obviously, they go up early, 2-0. Brown allows the homer in the first. Everybody's going, shit, here we go again, myself included. And then Ben Brown settled in really nicely. Had himself a beautiful, beautiful day overall. And that's just what the Cubs needed, man. He stepped up. Credit, flowers where they are due to Ben Brown, because he came through in a big way. And I'll tell you what, absolutely needed it. Absolutely needed it when it's all said and done. Of course, PCA drives in a few runs early. They get some insurance runs a little bit later, thanks to Matt Shaw continuing to swing a hot bat. And then, of course, as our good friend Alop mentioned a little bit earlier, the truckery of Colson Montgomery by Ian Happ. Interference is called. Ian Happ is awarded home plate. As a result, the Cubs get the fifth run, and that was an important run because that was the game-winning run. White Sox getting a 3-run shot out of Andrew Benintendi, who's just, for some reason, a Cubs pain in the ass. I don't know why. But Daniel Palencia, the 4-out save, and Cubs come away with a series victory over the White Sox. Lots of comments here to get to, and we are going to get to all of those right here, right now. Scott says 3 days and less than 21 hours until the trade deadline. Hashtag where's Jed? We're going to return to that comment here in a little bit. My dad says, I'm here for you. So sad for them, not in relation to the White Sox. Tyler says, Ronald, insert the epic Ron Luce rant on the White Sox from a few months ago. Yes, if everybody remembers that one, that was a good rant. That was a good one. You are nothing. You are nothing. And you continue to be nothing, and you will always be nothing. And that's how we feel about the White Sox after this weekend. Don't get it twisted. I knew a lot of White Sox fans that went to Saturday's game. So knowing they got to witness the Cubs win 6-1 in person, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say my heart smiled just a little bit. Just a little bit. It was good. It's good. Made me really, really happy, man. Made me really happy. Scott says here, Matt Shaw said, Eugenio Suarez, who? Yes, I totally agree there. Horner outfoxed the White Sox. That Stanford education coming in clutch. Yeah, that was honestly. Let's talk about that play here for a second, because Nico comes off the bag, Quero throws behind him. That had to have been a design play. Had to have. Nico knew better, especially with Hap chilling over there. You get this young team too focused on Nico Horner. That's kind of what I was thinking the whole time. I'm watching Nico start to run into the rundown. I'm like, shit, send Hap. Let him score. And then, of course, that whole play transpires, and they get a big run. And you know what, man? Sometimes just the smarter baseball team is going to win games, and that's exactly what happened on that play. Incredible call out there, Alop. I totally agree with you when it's all said and done. And yes, baseball news here. Seth Lugo did sign an extension today, a 2-year extension. There is a vesting option for a 3rd year in 2028. So that will nullify his option year that he currently has on his contract. He will be a Kansas City Royal probably for at least one more season after this one, if not both, when it's all said and done. Depends where the Royals are really in the next 2 years. So good on Seth Lugo. I think it's like $23 million a year for the 2 years. I don't know what the vesting option number is yet. I don't think it's been disclosed. My guess is it's probably somewhere around like 14, 15 million bucks, because I think he'll be like age 38 by the time that year comes up. So I could see a world where that happens. But to Scott's point, no longer a trade deadline piece, right? Seth Lugo was probably the one Kansas City Royal that I think a lot of people thought could be traded because of his ability to become a free agent after this season. And that is not the case anymore. He will remain in Kansas City. Lop says here that double play turned by Horner on the infield fly was also art. Yeah, I mean, Nico just continues to show where it's all said and done. Let's see what does it say. The Brew Crew owns them since 17. They were supposed to win 5 World Series, just like the Bears. Cheap underachievers. Brew Crew lowest payroll. Legio. Yeah, well, Midadar, I don't see any trophy cases in the Brewers trophy case, so I'm not too concerned about you guys just yet. We'll talk about you guys a little bit later in the show. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this thing, right? The White Sox series was fun and all. I'm fully ready to put it in the past. We got bigger things to talk about right now, and it's not even on the calendar per se. In terms of games and what's to come, obviously there's a big series coming up this week with the Milwaukee Brewers, as Midadar kind of, I guess, gave us a precursor to with his comment there. It's trade deadline time, folks. It is trade deadline time, and there is a trade-sized elephant in the room right now with the Chicago Cubs team, because it's a wondering of like, what are they going to do, right? We've continued to watch over the last few days. The Josh Naylor trade back on Thursday was kind of the unofficial ready, set, go of the trade deadline chaos. When it's all said and done, he decided, they being the Mariners, go ahead and get Naylor. The Diamondbacks announced that they are full-blown sellers. So that immediately interests everybody, right? Especially with the Cubs. Eugenio Suarez, apparently, if you believe what you read, the Cubs are the team that's the most interested in Suarez's services for the remainder of the year. You have to wonder if would they try to include like a Merrill Kelly and a Zach Gallen and just take one huge swing and give up a big prospect package for that. Jay's got a great point here. He wants the Cubs to get Gore from the Nationals. There's a lot of smoke around the Cubs potentially getting Mackenzie Gore. The name that Joey brought up on Thursday's show that was also a national that I thought was a great name that I don't think really anybody spoke about, and Ahmed Rosario. He just got traded to the Yankees, which the Yankees, another team, because they went out and also got Ryan McMahon from the Rockies. So it feels like they're probably out of the Suarez sweepstakes, despite Yankees fans swearing Eugenio Suarez was already a New York Yankee, even though he was still wearing a Diamondbacks uniform over the last couple of weeks. So there's still a lot to shake out. Lugo is now off the market. Supposedly the Cubs really like Mitch Keller and are willing to give up a lot. Again, that's kind of I'll call it the one garbage rumor I've seen, because that's not really being reported by a lot of reliable sources. I think the most reliable stuff I've seen so far, I typically listen to Bruce Levine, because Bruce Levine is pretty intertwined in the market of Chicago. Usually what he says is carries some weight, even if it's not necessarily something that comes to fruition, but definitely carries weight when it's all said and done. And for the Cubs to be tied to like the Rays and the Diamondbacks and the Marlins, that feels right. And it feels interesting because it really does feel like the Cubs have been tied to every freaking team that is reportedly selling, right? So you have to wonder just kind of the what is to come, what's expected, and kind of where Jed's head is at. And I think that's kind of where I want to take this a little bit here, because I sit back and I sit here and I've seen some interesting trade proposals that are out there. Scott, I hate to burn. He said Ron rocking the Red Bill Cubs should take notice. I agree. I like the Red Bill Cubs hats. I always have. I actually own a few Cubs Red Bills, but this one's just got the red underneath. This is the baby blue, all baby blue hat. I love this thing. Bobby Foster, our colleague here at Cubs on Tap, turned me on to this hat. So I desperately wanted this one when it was all said and done. But, it's going to be, I'm really curious, like what Jed's trying to do here. Is Jed trying to hold on to Owen Casey and everybody else is tradable? Or is it truly like everybody else is tradable, but he has to feel like he's getting value if he's moving Casey? I think it's the latter, truly. I don't think he's married to anybody per se in terms of the prospect pool. I'm just wondering, like, what's the package? Like, who are the prospects that depart, right? Because not every top 10 prospect the Cubs own is going to be gone after this deadline. I think if you ask the Cubs who they would want to see gone, if they had to pick, I'm sure Ballesteros, because he really doesn't have a position with the Cubs going forward. Maybe Kevin Alcantara, because I think he's this like what if, and he's done some good things, but I don't think we've truly seen the full potential of what he is just yet. Maybe James Triantos, just because they have so many middle infielders, and you've got Nico for at least one more season after this one, and of course you've got Dansby for the foreseeable future. So I think that's the kind of where I look at it personally, right? Is those are the names I'm watching for a little bit more most maybe than Owen Casey. I also think if they're getting a pitcher, which as Darren says here, right, value in years If Casey goes, I think that also applies to Jackson Wiggins, because Jackson Wiggins has been so good, and he's down in Double-A, and Brandon B with a great point here. He's out in the Knoxville market. He says the Marlins Double-A team just spent the entire week in Knoxville. So any Marlins personnel that were with the Double-A team this week, we're certainly watching, what the Cubs had to offer at the the Knoxville level. I got to get used to them not being the Tennessee Smokies anymore. So it's going to be genuinely interesting. I'm almost more interested to see who they trade than who they trade for, because we all know what they need, right? There is no they could use this, and this. So maybe if they fill a couple of them, it's no, you need starting pitching. You probably need one more bullpen arm, and maybe you need a position player, right? Maybe a guy to play third base. Maybe he's a guy who's just a really good bench bat, right? I think that's why Joey brought up Ahmed Rosario on Thursday's show and why that name made a lot of sense. It will be genuinely interesting to see how this trade deadline plays out. And Brandon B has a good point here. This is something I brought up probably a month and a half ago when we were starting to talk about way too early trade deadline stuff back in June. He says what happens with Owen Casey will be very telling of the Tucker confidence meter, and I totally agree with that. I have said that for a while now on this show. I think if Owen Casey sticks out through this deadline, I think there's a very real chance we don't see Kyle Tucker in a Cubs uniform after this season. If he's gone, I still don't necessarily think it's set in stone, but I think that would show that the Cubs are confident they can keep Tucker in the fold. So that's kind of another underlying story that we can kind of keep in mind too, as these prospects depart, right? And again, that's where a lot of this kind of intrigue comes into play that I'm talking about here, because who are they going to trade, and who are you going to make a deal with? Because now that you have the extended playoff, right? We just saw the Atlanta Braves buy on Eric Fetty today. Granted, they gave up cash to the Cardinals. I mean, it was a very small trade, but they still added an arm. Kansas City added Randall Grichuk, right? So, and just signed Seth Lugo instead of trading him. So they kind of doubled down, saying we're not going to sell. We're gonna keep pushing, and maybe we can sneak into a wild card. And if we don't, we come back. And I think that's what is so important, right? It is now you've got the Royals acting as almost buyers in a way. You've got some of these other teams acting like, they are in it still. So the Cubs not only are going to have to give a package that a team wants, they're going to have to compete with a lot of other teams who are looking to add a lot of the same things, right? Pitching is always a big thing at every trade deadline. And Eugenio Suarez is going to be a hot name. The Seattle Mariners have been linked to Suarez at a nauseating clip. I don't necessarily know the validity of the Reds thing. To me, that feels kind of false. I don't see that happening. Unless they're confident they can give him a 3-year deal or something and keep him in the fold. And then you also sit back, though, and you have to ask the question, because, Scott says here, he says, the Cubs are getting at least 3, and this is a spicy take. He says they're getting at least 3 of the following: Sandy Alcantara, Mitch Keller, Mackenzie Gore, Joe Ryan, Dylan Cease, Eugenio Suarez, Kyle Finnegan. If they got 3 of those names, your top 5 prospects are all gone. Period. That's what's going to happen. But I sit back and I look at this list of names here, and I don't think Dylan Cease gets traded. Genuinely. I think that was a load of crap, those rumors. Because, they want to add a player who's going to help them now. They're like a couple games back of the Dodgers because the Dodgers have started to falter. They're not going to just punt. I know Dylan Cease is going to be a free agent and he's a Boris client, but they're not going to punt. Washington doesn't have to trade Mackenzie Gore. They could, and they probably would get the most value right now because he's still under team control for 2 more years. But they don't have to. The Pirates don't have to trade Mitch Keller, especially because he's under contract for 3 more years after this one. The Marlins don't have to trade Sandy Alcantara, because if they hold on to him for another year and he comes back next year even better, I would make the argument then that they get more for Sandy Alcantara than they might at this year's deadline. And I make the same argument with the Twins and Joe Ryan. It's nice to be like, well, we're interested in these guys and we want the Cubs to go get these guys, but we don't even know if these guys are all going to get traded. I think that's the hardest part with this deadline and why Jed hasn't done anything yet. I think there's a lot of just uncertainty still of who really truly is selling. And I think a lot of teams, because I think it's a seller's market, I think a lot of these teams are a little hesitant because, it's a seller's market, but you have to choose to sell. And because of the expanded playoff, teams aren't as eager to just sell anymore unless it's expiring contracts, which Jed has already made it clear that he's not giving up high prospect capital for expiring term. And I don't blame him. I wouldn't do that either. I don't think that's good business. I'm really, really interested to see what happens here. A couple other comments. Better watch those Royals. Sneaky good from Triple R Bail Bonds. Yeah, I mean, they're a good ball club. I think that's a team that bounces back after this season. I think they just had a bit of a strange, year. I think they'll be back and doing just fine. Brandon says here, Cubs could use pop, period. So many runners continually getting left on base. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think they just need to be able to get back to some small ball too. He also said great regular season guy is Dylan Cease. Alap says here, does Jed really care about the prospects though? He's on a contract year. If he has a feeling that Ricketts won't bring him back, then maybe his attachment to the prospects might not be as strong. I think that's a great question. Again, I think his attachment to the prospects is more based on value than it is about the prospects, if that makes sense. Like he wants value in any trade he's getting. He'll give up an Owen Casey if the value's there, right? Because Owen Casey is arguably a major league ready prospect at this point. There's a lot of kind of, I don't think Jed is married to anybody. But you can also sit here and make the argument that the Cubs are one of the best teams in baseball right now. Do you really want to lose Jed if you're Ricketts? I don't think so. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well. Brandon says here, Washington GM is a puppet right now. Does he have any power? A fair question. And I think that's where you kind of have to, wonder, like, do they see Mackenzie Gore as a part of the future? Because if they do, they'll certainly hold on to him. But if they don't, then I do believe he gets moved. But, there's a lot of what's what there. And Alap says I answered my question. I don't think I answered it fully. I think I just kind of alluded to it a little bit when it's all said and done. My dad says Keller, Gore, Suarez. That's costing you an arm, a leg, and your big toe on your other leg. Darren says still say Suarez or Brewers is a possibility being he's a rental. Frightens me. I completely agree with that as well. Depends, I guess, how serious they truly are are they going for it this year, right? I mean, you have to kind of ask that question too. Scott says here, there's no point of having 5 outfielder top prospects when you have Happ, PCA, and Tucker. Trade the farm for what you need. Well, I mean, Happ's only got 1 year after this one, and Tucker's a free agent after this one. So if you really want to get serious, I mean, and Seiya Suzuki only has 1 more year after this one. The only player that's under team control beyond the 2026 season is PCA. Again, I think it comes back down to value. What do you get, and are you getting what you think you want? Alap asks, is there another GM Jed could fleece like he did with the Mets and the PCA deal? So it's easy to look back in hindsight and say that Jed fleeced the Mets. I don't think any of us felt like they fleeced him. The Mets were a good baseball team, and Javier Baez was having a good season in 2021. And he actually put up better numbers once he got to New York than he was putting up with the Cubs in 2021. And let's also not forget, it wasn't just Javi for PCA. The Cubs gave Trevor Williams in that deal too. And I know everybody's like, well, Trevor Williams was nothing, but he was another arm. You gave up 2 major league players for Pete Crow Armstrong. And they also really didn't know what PCA was. That was kind of like the Fernando Tatis deal where PCA hadn't played minor league ball yet because he was hurt and he had just been drafted. So really, nobody really knew what Pete Crow Armstrong was. The Cubs were just like, hey, we're taking a flyer on this kid and seeing what happens. He's a good prospect. Javi's playing really well. We should get this kind of prospect. So I don't know if there's necessarily a GM that they can fleece because, like, who are you fleecing? Now, in this instance, right, if the Cubs are going to fleece somebody per se, I think that's being able to convince a team to take a certain prospect that maybe you lose like a little bit of faith in, right? Like if you can convince, hypothetically speaking, I don't know if this is true, but let's say you convince the Washington Nationals that Moises Ballesteros is the DH of the future and they never have to worry about his bat being in the lineup ever again because he's just that good as of a hitter and he's worth the everyday DH spot. And you convince them to take Triantos and maybe Brandon Birdsell, hypothetically speaking, right? That could be a fleece, right? If none of those prospects pan out. And you would get a Mackenzie Gore. Right. I think that's the tough thing about this too is like, yeah, the Cubs are dealing prospects. But ladies and gentlemen, it never gets old. It's the best recyclable line in the history of human existence, courtesy of Ron Luce. A prospect is a prospect until they're no longer a prospect. These kids carry value right now because they're a lottery ticket, not because they've done anything at the big league level. The Cubs could very easily turn around, give one of these guys to a team that doesn't know how to continue developing talent, and they don't pan out. So that could then become a fleece in hindsight, but it's very rare that baseball trades, I think, feel like fleeces from the start, right? And I think that's just because of the nature of the sport. And yeah, I kind of agree with this, right? Buyers don't necessarily fleece, only sellers can fleece buyers. And even then, right, like you don't really know if you're fleecing them until that prospect works out, right? When it's all said and done. So be interesting to see. Brandon says here, you have to think that the Washington general manager needs to do anything to show how much he is capable of the job, an audition per se, 100%. I think, if they could get a big return for Gore, I think they're going to do it. It also might not come from the Cubs, right? I know it's easy to sit here in a silo and be like, well, the Cubs can get everybody. Well, they can't because they're competing against what, 5, 6, 7, 8 other teams, right? I mean, let's dive in here really quick, shall we? To the standings and kind of what we're looking at here in the wild card picture. Just in the NL, you have the Brewers and the Cubs tied top with the best records in baseball for the Central, right? With the other team effectively being the top wild card team. Mets, Dodgers. So all 4 of those teams are buying. The Phillies are going to buy. The Padres are probably going to buy. I see why the Reds might buy. The Giants could buy. And that's probably about it in terms of aggressive buying. But that's still, what, 6, 7 teams in the NL? 8 teams in the NL? And then you got to worry about Toronto, Detroit, Houston, Boston, Seattle, Texas even has found themselves right back in it because they've been hot. Tampa Bay is still very much in it. Cleveland is still very much in it. Kansas City's only 4 games back, and they bought on Randall Grichuk, right? So all those teams are going to be competing with Washington. So Washington's probably going to have a laundry list of potential people that they can trade with. And I think that's going to be something that we'll have to keep an eye on. Darren says here, Mets only openly admitted PCA was a mistake. They never thought his bat would become what it is. Yeah, it's all a gamble. They're prospects until they're no longer prospects, right? It's like lottery tickets. That's just really what it is. When it's all said and done. Oh, trust me, that one is 100% going on a shirt. Don't you worry, Brandon. Hank says here, Cubs' first 2 draft picks, also outfielders, and 4 of their first 6 draft picks were also outfielders. He says they do have great depth in the outfield in the minors for trade value, 1,000%. I wouldn't even be shocked, low key, if they could find a way to keep Casey and they trade one of the kids they just drafted. I think you could see that happening too, because now that's a rule that those guys can be traded. You never know, but they 100% backloaded in case, 4 of their top 6, 3 of them were college guys, and the one high school kid, they actually got to sign for way above slot value. But he was like the high school home run derby winner, just huge power kid as an outfielder. So they 1,000%, went on a little bit of a run there and got some depth to back it all up. Brandon says here, when will the Cubs go on their 10 to 12 game run? I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if their schedule really allows them to. You would hope that it comes after the trade deadline. Because of course you have Milwaukee for the next 3 games. We're going to touch on that here in a little bit. I would make the argument you might have a chance in August to do that. And here's why. Baltimore is not very good, and you have them at Wrigley to start the month of August. Cincinnati is hanging around, right? But like the Cubs are largely better than Cincinnati. Then you have an off day. Then you play the Cardinals. The Blue Jays are very good. That's a tough series on the road. And then you've got the Pirates, but then you got 5 games with the Brewers in 4 days. So maybe early August is where you can go on a little bit of that run. And then after Milwaukee, you've got the Angels, the Giants, and the Rockies, but those are all away games. So the Giants will be a tough series. You can make the argument the Angels could be a tough series because they've played better. But Colorado's Colorado. You would hope they take care of business there. And then even look at the month of September. I mean, Atlanta's down this year, but they're still a good baseball team. You see them 6 times in September. Washington in September. You see Cincinnati again in September for 4 games. You see Pittsburgh again for 3 games. You close the season with St. Louis. You got Tampa and the Mets in there who are both good teams. So I really don't know if their schedule allows them to go on this like 10 to 12 game run per se to run away with the division. I don't think they're going to run away with the division. And that's what makes these next 8 games with the Brewers over the next month or so important, right? 3 this week, and then you got those 5 at Wrigley. In the mid to late August there. Have to wait and see. And Brandon Jefferson Rojas had a good 2 days. Yes, he did. And again, a top prospect that I'm sure his name's being thrown around in a bunch of trade discussions. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I will make a prediction. I don't think it's for a specific player because I genuinely have no idea. The Cubs have been, effectively linked, quote unquote, to every freaking player that's imaginably available. So there's not a lot of smoke to anything right now. It's just a lot of hearsay. So I'm not going to make any predictions about who they get. I already did that on Thursday's show, and I'm probably going to look like an ass for it, but neither here nor there. But I do think the day that the trades begin to pick up, which I also believe will be the day that the Cubs make their first deal, even if it's a smaller trade, because I think they're going to make more than 1 trade at this deadline. I think they're going to make probably 2. I think it comes Tuesday. I think Tuesday is when we start to see things really ramp up with the Thursday deadline, because I think there's a lot of crazy discussions going on right now. That's my guess. And we're just going to kind of have to wait and see what happens. Obviously there's been a few, smaller deals, McMahon, Rosario, Fetty, those type of guys, but like the big names that everybody's expecting to be moved at this deadline have not been moved yet. So I think we're going to start to see some weird shit happen. Probably starting Tuesday. I think tomorrow is going to be a little quiet yet. Monday, maybe one little trade happens somewhere in Major League Baseball. But I think the quote unquote shit hitting the fan probably doesn't start until Tuesday. Alap says here, just a couple more notes here before we look ahead. How on earth are the Brewers doing what they're doing? Their offensive metrics stink. Yeah, they pitch really well and they're dumb and they win games in stupid ways. That's why I hate the Brewers, because I don't know if any of you guys know Benchwarmer Bran. He's on YouTube and other places. He does like the skits and he's very football focused. And he did one about the Chiefs and how they have like a dark magic witch that with a cauldron and she like chimes up spells and that's why they win games, because they weren't that good. That is what the Brewers have. They've got some witch underneath that godforsaken fucking stadium just stewing away with all the rotten cheese and beer that they can't sell in the fucking venue, and is just like casting spells to make this team good. Because I agree with you on paper, in principle, in terms of a lot of their offensive statistics, like they aren't great. but they just find ways to win games, and it's fucking irritating. Today's a great example, right? Andrew Vaughn comes out of fucking nowhere and is great. And it's like, oh, Jesus, what is this? So I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm right there with you a lot, but I genuinely am. Darren says, Jonathan Long, another player that should have decent value in a trade. 1,000%. He is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and Brandon B. Yeah, that's what makes them so annoying. Yeah, 100%. He also says, speaking of playoffs and one seats, how about those steam wheelers? How about those steam wheelers? How about those steam wheelers, Brandon? We're going to take this thing off topic for 2 seconds. So some people may know, some people may not know. I do color commentary for the IFL, the Quad City Steam Wheelers. That's these guys right here. I got the little helmet here. My boys. They didn't win on Saturday, but the fantastic Jacksonville Sharks took care of the Green Bay Blizzard down in Jacksonville, and that game ended before our game concluded. And because of that, the Wheelers wrapped up the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So the road to Tucson in the national championship game runs through the heart of the Midwest in the Quad Cities. Super duper excited about that. The Wheelers will host the Jacksonville Sharks, ironically, in the first round of the playoffs. That will be a 3:05 game on Saturday, August 2nd. I will be on that call with the great Redrick Terry on the play-by-play. They are doing on the IFL network is where you can watch the games. If you pay $10, you get access to all the playoff games through their streaming platform. So if you're a Cubs fan and you want to watch some indoor football and you apparently like my voice enough to listen to it outside of this podcast already, check out my boys, Quad City Steam Wheelers, on Saturday, and that'll be a good game. And if they win that, they host another game. And if they win that, they go to the national title game. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Boom. Yeah, friggin' point. Exactly. Good stuff. I am crazy. You're right. What are you going to do about it? You birthed me. I don't know what you want me to do about it. Jace is here. Are you doing a live show for the trade deadline? Probably not a live show during the deadline or leading up to the deadline, because I believe it's in like the middle of the afternoon. And most guys aren't available at that time of the day. We will be live after the trade deadline. Thursday's an off day, but because we run our Tuesday, Thursday schedule, we'll be talking about that Brewer series and 100% probably recapping what the Cubs did at the deadline if they don't make a trade before Tuesday's show. So, okay, and 5 p.m. Central is the deadline. Yeah, probably not leading up to the deadline. If that changes, we'll certainly say something. It is an off day, so we can kind of run whenever. We're not competing with the Cubs playing on Thursday. But I think as of now, the expectation is a show after the deadline, maybe not necessarily leading up to it, but an idea that will be taken into consideration nonetheless, because I do think it's a fun idea. And if it's plausible, I think it makes for a whole lot of fun when it's all said and done. Brandon said this a little bit earlier. He says, I believe that the trade deadline is having an impact on each of their minor league affiliates. 100%, because you've seen a lot of guys get scratched from starts and games and things like that. And I think you're 100% on with that, Brandon. In addition, how does Andrew freaking Vaughn have a because it's the dark magic, Hank, of the Brewers. I told you. And the White Sox don't know how to develop talent. Let's be brutally honest here. Or at least that iteration of the White Sox didn't, right? Andrew Vaughn was obviously a 2019 draft pick. He got rushed to the majors because they needed a bat, and he never panned out. And then he goes to the Brewers. I'm sure they showed him something that he was doing that he could do better. And you're seeing why he was the number 3 overall pick in his draft class, because he's a good baseball player. The White Sox just ruined him. Are we surprised? Absolutely fucking not. But yeah, I don't know, Hank. I don't know how he's doing it. It's the creepy witch with the cauldron. I'm telling you right now. Just say it, not competing with Sox on tap. Yeah. Not competing. Never competing. And Carl asks Jay in the comments, do we think we're getting Suarez? So some good conversation amongst the comment section. We'd love to see it. Trade deadline. It's going to be fun, folks. It's going to be really fucking fun. And I'm sure I'll be posting some thoughts. I'm sure some of the other guys will be posting some thoughts on X You can follow me. I'm at Loose on Tap, as you can see here in my little banner. And if you listen to us on podcast form, you can find all the other guys' places to follow along. It's going to be interesting. I'm genuinely excited to see what happens. I know our good friend Nick is currently out of town, so we'll see if he posts anything. Tyler will be out of town toward the end of the week, but I'm sure we'll hear from Tyler. I'm sure we'll hear from Joey. So yeah, just keep an eye on some Twitter handles, and we'll see what happens here over the next couple of days. All right, let's address the freaking elephant in the room. The other elephant in the room. What's on tap next? It is those irritating, pesky fucking Milwaukee Brewers. They are on deck for a 3-game series. These are all up at American Family Field in Wisconsin. We got a really good pitching matchup on Monday to start this series off. It will be Matthew Boyd versus Mizorowski. Mizorowski's been sensational, 4-1 with a 2.45 ERA, but Matthew Boyd's been better, 11-3 with a 2.20 ERA. Need a good Matthew Boyd game in this one. Set the tempo, get a win in the first game. That's a 6:40 start on Monday night. Tuesday, also a 6:40 start. This one will feature Colin Ray versus Quinn Priester. The 24-year-old for Milwaukee is 9-2 on the season with a 3.28 ERA. Ray 8-4 on the year with a 4.06 ERA. Some of that ballooned a little bit because of his last time out. But we'll see him on Tuesday night. And then Wednesday is a getaway day game. So it's a 1:10 start, and that's another great pitching matchup. It'll be Shota Imanaga versus Freddie Peralta. Peralta 12-4 with a 2.81 ERA and 131 punch-outs this year. Shota 7-4, and his ERA a little inflated now after that Sox game on Friday. 3.12. It's Chicago's zip code. Of course, it's only going to get better. And of course, the 55 K is only for Shota because he just hasn't pitched a lot. But nonetheless, Shota's had a good season. So a couple of really good pitching matchups in this one. Tuesday, probably the most underwhelming, but still a good pitching matchup. Cubs get to avoid Woodruff, who just recently came back. I think that's a win because Woodruff has always pitched well against the Cubs. And we'll see what happens. I know your boss. Yeah, I know my boss too. How about Palencia looking? Yeah, anyway. Sorry, I got very confused by that comment. I don't know if I caught the context of it, so I apologize in advance. So those are the 3. The Cubs need 2 out of 3. Plain and simple. There's no other way to dice it. Sweep would be awesome, but I'm not going to put my eggs in the basket because I'm not going to ask for things that are unrealistic. Maybe not unrealistic. Highly unlikely is probably the better term. Take 2 out of 3, man. They got to win that game on Tuesday. To me, that Tuesday game is a must win, especially because you don't see Mizorowski or Peralta. The Cubs have always been able to get to Peralta a little bit. It's been weird, right? Either Peralta's owned the Cubs or he gets shelled. Probably more owning than shelling, but I can remember a couple games where Peralta didn't pitch the greatest against the Cubs. But they got to take 2 of 3, man, because you got that stretch in early August where you play a lot of beatable opponents, and you can just keep that 2 out of 3 streak going. You know, I think back to this Kansas City Royals series that we just saw and how nice it would have been to take 2 out of 3 from them. You know, you think about some of the other series, that Minnesota Twins series earlier in the month. You see some of those, man, you would really like that extra game right now, given that the Cubs and Brewers are tied. And I mean, this is going to be appointment television for not just Cubs and Brewers fans, but like maybe Major League Baseball. Like, these are the 2 best teams in the NL playing a 3-game series this week for pretty much whoever's going to have bragging rights atop the division still when it's all said and done. It's just 2 out of 3. I don't care what they look like. I don't care if it's ugly or pretty. Just 2 out of 3. It's all I want for the Cubs is two wins out of the 3 games. And I will be genuinely happy when we get to Thursday's show, and we'll be talking about additions that should help this Cubs team in the months of August and September. Alop says here, we're really going to need the bullpen to be crisp in the series. No room for error. Totally agree with that. Hank says here, Matt Shaw with a 9-game hitting streak and over 1,000 OPS since the All-Star break. He thinks that means no Suarez at the deadline. I think no Suarez because I think his price is going to be too high. I think the Diamondbacks are going to ask for the moon. The moon, the earth, and the stars. And I don't think the Cubs are going to part ways with that. Not for a guy who's on an expiring contract. So, yeah, I would, you know what? I would be fine if Matt Shaw is your 9 hitter playing solid defense at third for the rest of the year. That's fine. I think it was it might have been a good friend of the program, Mr. Matt Cozy over at Locked On Cubs, talking about how like Nolan Arenado and Matt Shaw have like the same stats this year, like offensively speaking. And I think Shaw is a slightly better defender than Arenado this year by defensive runs saved. If they don't get Suarez, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, would the pop in the lineup look really nice? Absolutely. But I don't think it's the end all be all. I think the pitching is the end all be all. You got to get at least one starter, and a bullpen arm would be nice. I wouldn't be mad about 2 starters, even though Cade Horton, when we were talking about that, we're like, well, Cade Horton could get sent down. And then he shoved against the White Sox on Saturday and was like, fuck you, Ron Luce. I'm not going anywhere. Which good for Cade Horton. That was an awesome start. I totally forgot to bring that up earlier. I was so deadline focused that Cade Horton was fucking awesome on Saturday. Yes, I love that for Cade Horton. Love that for Cade Horton. Drive Secure 24/7. It says here, sorry, hilarious name for the YouTube. That caught me off guard. Brewers should cool off a bit. Fuck, I certainly hope so. I hope it's this series too. And Alop asks, can they ask for the moon? How about a pint of Blue Moon? You know, I'm not a huge Blue Moon guy anymore, but yeah, you know, I mean, if it. We'll see, man. I would send a pack of Blue Moon to the Diamondbacks front office if it means that Suarez is a Cub for a reasonable price. I just don't think they're going to be reasonable when it's all said and done. Jay's got the right idea here as we begin to wrap this thing up. But before we get out of here, I do want to remind everybody Cubs on Tap is one of 2 shows here covering the Chicago Cubs. Our friends over at the Dingers podcast run every Monday nights. Be sure to check out them. You can find them here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. In addition, as well as their Facebook page is where you can find them in as well. And of course on X at Dinger Cubs is where to find those guys. Mitch and the boys do a phenomenal job. Of course, you can follow us as well at Cubbies on Tap on the socials. Follow all the boys as well, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks. It's not just the Cubs here that we're covering. Bears, things are starting to pick up as we get into the month of August. That means football is right around the corner. You can hear from me and Quentin. We did a show on Thursday night talking about some training camp battles that we're keeping an eye on for roster positions. And then we have a really, really exciting show on Tuesday night. It'll be such a fun show. Mr. Thorne, Brandon Thorne, one of the O-line experts, is going to be joining us. We're going to talk some Bears O-line and all that good stuff. And you guys know I love me some offensive linemen. So be sure to tune in for that as well. And of course, you know, the Bulls and the Blackhawks are kind of just twiddling our thumbs until September gets here. But those sports will then begin to pick up as the fall wanes on. And of course, Cubs fans, you got friends that like the White Sox. Trust me, you do, because I got a lot of them too. They didn't have a great weekend. So send your friends, our friends over at Sox on Tap, and they can all be friends and wallow in the tears of losing to the Cubs and being owned in their own city once again. And of course, ontapsportsnet.com and at ontapsportsnet. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Matt Shaw is solid. I'd be all right with them staying loyal to him. We say this till you hear batting fourth for the Milwaukee Brewers, Eugenio Suarez. Yeah. It would be, I'll tell you what, if no other reason besides the Brewers not getting him, to hear Pat Hughes say his name for the rest of the season on the radio would be a lot of fun, because I love when he says Eugenio Suarez. Like, it's my favorite thing in the world. It's absolutely fun. Portillo's or Lou Malnati's and Malort for Suarez. I don't know if that gets it done a lot, but we'll have to wait and see. But I genuinely appreciate every single one of you that tuned in, whether you just listened along or whether you were in our comment section like all our great commenters tonight. Thank you for jumping in with us here at Cubs on Tap. We will be back with you guys on Tuesday night. No, I don't know who our panelists will be just yet. Again, we have a lot of guys out of town, a lot of vacations and things coming up here in the not so distant future, as well as some busy schedules coming up. A little bit more on that later from me. Unfortunately, you guys will probably see a little bit less of me in August and September on these airwaves, but I will try to poke in and be as useful as much as I humanly can. when it feels fit. But we'll be here for the trade deadline, and I'll see you guys for sure on Thursday. But we will see who is live after Tuesday's show. Hopefully, we're talking about 2 Cubs wins. That would be ideal. The Brewers are on deck next after the Cubs take care of business against the Chicago White Sox. Just remember, the Cubs own Chicago. That was the name of tonight's episode. Again, thank you to everybody that joined in both the comment section as well as just listening along. If you listened on audio later, we appreciate you guys just as much. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I like what Darren's got to say. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Jay's got the right idea. Darren says, fuck the Brewers. Let's get a sweep. I agree. FTB, FTC as always. And of course, let's go Cubbies.